job. I'm really proud of you. It was nice to not sweat one out, right? It was nice to come in and to have high energy, right? To play together, to continue to build on a lead. Ty? It's the ultimate. I hope you understand it's the ultimate compliment that we can trust you to start you in a game and to play you these kind of minutes and to.
There is a moment in Stephanie White's post-game speech that you need to watch again. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. The way her entire body relaxes. The way the tension that normally lives in her shoulders just disappears. The way she smiles, not a professional coach smile, but something that looks a lot closer to genuine relief. And here's the thing that makes that moment genuinely fascinating. Caitlin Clark was not even in the building that night. What you are about to hear is not speculation. It is not a hot take dressed up as analysis. It is a pattern that has been building quietly all season long. And on the night of May 9th, 2025, that pattern became impossible to ignore.
You guys know I watch the ticket sales. I've long history of me doing videos and showing you guys ticket sales. The great majority of the tickets for this game were sold prior to the Mercury game the other night. Why? It's simple. Kate Martin plays for the Los Angeles Sparks, and people thought they were finally going to get the Caitlin Clark, Kate Martin reunion game tonight, and they didn't get that.
If you want to understand what is really happening inside the Indiana Fever, stick around. Because what this post-game speech reveals about the relationship between this coach and this franchise player says more than any press conference ever will. And before we go any further, if you're new here and you enjoy honest, unfiltered sports breakdowns, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. We do not sugarcoat anything on this channel, and we're just getting started. The game that should not have happened this way. On May 9th, 2025, the Indiana Fever took the floor against the Los Angeles Sparks on CBS. Primetime, national television, the kind of broadcast slot that the WNBA has been fighting decades to earn, the kind of platform that leagues pay enormous amounts of goodwill and negotiating capital to secure. And on that specific night, on that particular stage, Caitlin Clark did not play. The official explanation came with a list. Back injury, throat injury, groin injury, 3 separate ailments, all converging at once, all landing on the same night for the same game on the same nationally televised platform. And look, injuries happen. That is professional basketball. Players get banged up and medical staffs make calls. That is real. That is legitimate. But when you stack the context around this specific absence, the timing starts to feel like something worth examining closely. The majority of tickets for this game were sold before the Phoenix Mercury matchup earlier that week. That detail sounds small. It is actually everything. Think about why fans were buying tickets in advance for a Fever versus Sparks game. This is not a natural marquee matchup on paper. The Sparks are not a powerhouse. This is not a rivalry with decades of history behind it. People were buying tickets because Kate Martin plays for Los Angeles. And fans, real fans who had been following this story since the Iowa days, wanted to see what happens when Caitlin Clark and Kate Martin share the same floor in professional basketball for the first time. That is not a manufactured storyline. That is organic. That is the kind of authentic connection that sports marketers spend millions trying to create artificially and almost never succeed at. 2 players who built something real together in college, who won together, who genuinely care about each other, now on opposite sides of the floor in the professional game. That writes itself. Every single camera angle writes itself. And the WNBA treated it like background noise.
Look, 5 minutes before the game, okay? Right here, you can see there were a ton of tickets. A ton of tickets. Now, or a ton of empty seats tickets. A ton of empty seats. Right up here, 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 right up here. Luckily, somebody had a bootleg stream going on YouTube, and I tuned in for the first 2 or 3 minutes just to be able to see seats. Most of these seats got filled up. Okay, I'm not going to come on here and blow smoke up your asses.
5 minutes before tip-off, the upper sections of the arena looked like a warehouse after closing time. Entire rows sitting completely empty. Large patches of bare seats in sections that should have been full for a CBS national broadcast. And yes, most of those seats eventually filled in. People showed up. You cannot take that away. But here is the distinction that almost everyone glosses over, and it is the most important economic point in this entire conversation. Buying a ticket and tuning in on television are two completely different decisions with two completely different consequences. When fans buy tickets days in advance, those are sunk costs. The money is already spent. The transaction is already complete. Whether Caitlin Clark plays or does not play, whether the game is compelling or unwatchable, those fans either absorb the financial loss or show up anyway to get something out of the evening. Gate revenue is already locked in. That money does not disappear if Clark sits out. Television ratings are the complete opposite. Television ratings are real-time decisions. Every single person who turns on a WNBA broadcast is making an active, voluntary choice at that exact moment to spend their Friday night watching this specific game instead of doing literally anything else. There is no sunk cost. There is no obligation. There is only interest or the absence of it. And when a nationally televised game that was pulling 2.5 million viewers with Clark on the floor suddenly loses her, the question becomes brutally simple. How many of those viewers showed up for the Fever? And how many showed up for her?
Kate Martin plays for the Los Angeles Sparks, and people thought they were finally going to get the Caitlin Clark, Kate Martin reunion game tonight, and they didn't get that. I know we talked a lot about a boycott. I never expected that to show in the attendance. I didn't. Where it's going to show is the television ratings, which is where it counts. All right, ticket sales are great, and yeah, we very much take note when there's 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 fans missing. But people had bought tickets to try to see this right here.
If the ratings for that Sparks game came back under 1.5 million viewers, that is not a minor fluctuation. That is a collapse. That is a number that television network executives screenshot and bring into rights deal negotiations as evidence that the product is inconsistent, that the audience is player dependent, that the league cannot guarantee viewership without one specific athlete on the floor. And in the world of professional sports media rights, that kind of evidence costs league hundreds of millions of dollars in negotiating leverage. You want to understand where the real money lives in professional sports? It is not concessions. It is not parking. It is not even ticket revenue. It is the media rights deal. That is where franchises and leagues generate the capital that funds everything else. And those deals are built almost entirely on Nielsen numbers, on sustained, consistent, predictable viewership, on proof that people will actually watch. One game dropping from 2.5 million viewers to under 1 million is not just a bad night. It is a data point that changes conversations in boardrooms. And nobody in the Fever organization seems to be treating it that way. What the coach's body language is actually telling you.
Was that your first career three, right?
Yeah.
Really good team win. I'm proud of you guys. Get a couple days to get some rest.
Okay. Oh, Kelsey Mitchell's happy. She's happy. She scored like 26 points last night. Of course she's happy. Look at this. Evelyn DR posted this, and we saw it just now. Stephanie White was on the verge of tears talking about Ty Harris's performance.
Now we get to the part that sparked all of this. Stephanie White's post-game speech. She walks out after a win against the Sparks team, missing both De'Erica Hamby and Kelsey Plum. A depleted roster, a reduced opponent, and she delivers what can only be described as one of the most emotionally animated coaching performances you will see all season. The energy is there. The enthusiasm is genuine. She is practically glowing. And then she says the line that you need to hear one more time. It was nice to not sweat one out. Sit with that for a second. Not sweating one out. Meaning that when Caitlin Clark is on the floor, coaching this team is stressful, is something to endure, something to manage rather than enjoy. The presence of the player who turned this franchise from a league embarrassment into a national story is, apparently, a source of anxiety rather than excitement for the woman charged with coaching her. And then comes the moment with Ty Harris. Stephanie White stands there, voice cracking, visibly emotional, on the verge of tears, talking about a role player's contribution in a win over a shorthanded opponent. She talks about trust. She talks about the ultimate compliment. She talks about showing up. Now contrast that with how she speaks after games where Caitlin Clark drops 30 points and 10 assists. The compliments arrive like they're being pulled from somewhere she does not particularly want to go. Measured, appropriate, technically correct, but emotionally hollow. Every word carefully calibrated to acknowledge without celebrating. The difference is not subtle. It is not something you need to read between the lines to find. It is sitting directly on the surface, visible to anyone paying attention. And what it tells you about the internal dynamic of this team is genuinely alarming. Back injury, throat injury, groin injury, 3 separate physical issues, all significant enough to keep a player out, all arriving simultaneously for a 23-year-old professional athlete who has been playing through contact all season long. Caitlin Clark has been physically targeted since before she played her first professional minute. That is documented. That is a pattern that referees, analysts, and fans have all acknowledged. She has been fouled hard, grabbed, pushed, and in some cases flat out assaulted on the floor while officials looked in other directions. The Aaliyah Boston incident was simply the most recent example of something that has been happening consistently. So yes, it is entirely plausible that the physical toll has accumulated to a point where her body needed rest. Medical staffs make these calls. That is what they are there for. But here's where the questions start to pile up. Professional athletes play through pain. That is not a controversial statement. That is the baseline reality of every professional sports league in existence. Minor injuries get managed with treatment and tape and adrenaline. Discomfort gets tolerated. And the games that get circled on the calendar as worth pushing through are exactly the kind of games we were talking about here. National television, high-profile opponent, organic storyline that fans were specifically motivated to watch. Those are precisely the games where franchise players who are able to compete at all choose to compete. When the absence happens on that specific night, for that specific game, against that specific opponent, while the coach's post-game reaction looks like someone who just got exactly what they wanted, the questions that follow are not unreasonable. They're not malicious. They're just honest. Was this purely medical? It might have been. Could there have been other factors influencing the decision? The pattern we have observed all season makes that a fair thing to wonder about. And in professional sports, when patterns are consistent enough, wondering stops being cynical and starts being analytical. There is a take that's circulated after this game that perfectly illustrates a fundamental misunderstanding of how leagues survive financially. Someone posted celebrating the attendance, framing it as proof that the boycott failed, proof that the Fever do not need Caitlin Clark to draw a crowd. The attendance argument is the wrong argument entirely. Attendance matters for concession revenue, local sponsorship activation, and the visual product you're putting on television. Empty seats look bad on a broadcast. They send a message to casual viewers about how much other people care. So yes, attendance matters. Nobody is dismissing it, but it is not where professional sports leagues make or lose their financial futures. Think about the NFL. The NFL does not generate its absurd revenue because every stadium is full. The Cowboys sell out. The Chiefs sell out. But the Jacksonville Jaguars exist financially not because of their gate receipts, but because they are part of a league with a television rights deal worth billions. Every franchise benefits from the collective negotiating power that comes from proving to networks that people will watch NFL games, specifically because certain players and certain teams make casual audiences tune in. The NBA functions the same way. LeBron James, Stephen Curry, and now Victor Wembanyama drive viewership numbers that make the whole league's media rights package more valuable. A game between the Indiana Pacers and the Orlando Magic at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday pulls respectable ratings, not because those are glamour franchises, but because they exist inside an ecosystem where the overall product has been sold to casual fans as worth watching. The WNBA is trying to build that ecosystem right now. They're in the middle of the most critical growth period in the league's history, and Caitlin Clark is the single biggest driver of that growth. Her games pull viewership numbers that the league has never seen before. Her presence creates moments that casual sports fans who have never watched a WNBA game in their lives specifically tune in for. When she does not play, those casual fans do not watch. They're not going to spend their evening watching a league they discovered specifically because of her and then sit through a game she is not in. That is not cynicism. That is just human behavior. It is why the NFL schedules Patrick Mahomes in prime time. It is why the NBA makes sure LeBron is featured on Christmas games. Star power drives casual viewership. Casual viewership drives ratings. Ratings drive rights deals. Rights deals fund everything. The WNBA has its star, and portions of its own infrastructure seem to be working against her. Last season told a complete story. A story with a clear beginning, a clear method, and a clear result. The Indiana Fever were a punchline before Caitlin Clark arrived. That is not hyperbole. That is documented league history. Attendance was embarrassing. Ratings for their games were afterthoughts. National broadcast slots were not something anyone was fighting to give them. They were a franchise that existed in the background of a league that most casual sports fans had already stopped paying attention to. Then they drafted Caitlin Clark, and they largely got out of her way. They played fast. They pushed tempo. They built spacing around her ability to create off the dribble and punish defenses from the perimeter. They let the offense breathe, let her read the floor and manufacture advantages rather than forcing her into a rigid structure that ignored how she actually plays. And the result was not complicated. They went from league afterthought to playoff team in a single season. Attendance exploded. Television ratings for their games became appointment viewing. Sponsors who had never thought twice about the WNBA started paying attention. That transformation did not happen because the coaching staff discovered a revolutionary defensive scheme. It happened because they had a player unlike anything the league had seen before, and they built their operation around maximizing what she could do. This season, something shifted. The offense became structured in a different way, more deliberate, more focused on getting specific players specific looks in specific situations rather than allowing the game to flow through the player who reads it best. And you can see the effect on the floor. Clark's rhythm sometimes gets disrupted in ways it did not last year. Her body language in moments when the spacing collapses or a play breaks down shows someone who is processing frustration with a level of professionalism that deserves its own kind of respect. She never publicly complains. She never calls out the system, but the signs are there for anyone who watches closely. The philosophical tension between a coach who wants to impose structure and a player whose greatest value comes from freedom within structure is not new to professional basketball. It has ended coaching tenures across both the NBA and the WNBA. It has fractured franchises. It has sent generational talents to other organizations where their skills were better understood. And the question for the Indiana Fever right now is not whether this tension exists. It clearly does. The question is how long before something breaks. This is where the situation arrives at its most critical point. Professional sports have shown us this story before. A franchise player and a head coach develop an irreconcilable philosophical difference about how the team should operate. The tension simmers. It surfaces in body language and subtle post-game moments and the kinds of interactions that people in the building notice even if they do not talk about them publicly. And then eventually something forces the organization to make a decision. Either Caitlin Clark reaches a point where she decides the situation is not working and requests a trade, or Stephanie White's tenure ends because the ownership group recognizes that the coach and the franchise player cannot coexist in the way the franchise needs them to. There is no comfortable third outcome. There is no version where they simply work through it quietly and everything aligns perfectly next season. The philosophical gap is too visible. The contrast in how the coach operates with and without her best player is too documented at this point. Something has to give. And if you're sitting in the ownership group looking at this decision, it should be the easiest call you ever make in your professional life. You do not lose Caitlin Clark. You do not even entertain the possibility. You do not create conditions that make her want to leave. You do not allow an organizational dynamic to persist where the coach of your franchise seems measurably more comfortable in her absence. You protect that asset because that asset is not just a basketball player. She is the entire reason your franchise has cultural relevance right now. She is why your arena sells out. She is why CBS wants your games in national primetime slots. She is why casual sports fans who have never watched women's basketball in their lives know the name Indiana Fever. She is why sponsors are paying attention. She is why this league is in the middle of the most significant growth period it has ever experienced. And there are people inside the league, inside certain organizations, who seem to resent that rather than embrace it, who seem to wish the attention was more evenly distributed, that other players received comparable spotlight, that no single athlete dominated the narrative the way Clark does. And you know what? That sentiment is understandable on a human level. It is genuinely understandable. Professional athletes who work just as hard do not always receive comparable recognition, and that can feel deeply unfair. But wanting fair distribution of attention and making decisions that work against the player driving all the attention are two completely different things. One is a feeling. The other is an organizational strategy. And as an organizational strategy, working against your own star is not just unwise. It is financially destructive. It is the professional sports equivalent of a restaurant owner resenting the dish that keeps the whole place full every night and quietly removing it from the menu to prove a point. The television numbers for the Sparks game will function as the clearest possible evidence in this entire debate. If the ratings came back strong, if people tuned in despite knowing Clark was not playing, that would signal something genuinely positive about the WNBA's trajectory. It would mean that the league has successfully built enough broad general interest in its product that casual audiences are willing to watch, even when the specific player who brought them in originally is not on the floor. That would be meaningful. That would suggest the growth is becoming self-sustaining rather than dependent on one athlete indefinitely. But if the numbers collapsed significantly from the 2.5 million viewers the league polled for their previous national broadcast, then everything that a lot of people have been saying quietly gets confirmed loudly. The growth is almost entirely Clark dependent. The casual audience that has made these television numbers historic is showing up for her, not for the league as a whole. And without her on the floor, they simply choose to spend their Friday night somewhere else. Neither outcome is comfortable for the league to sit with. But the second outcome carries consequences that extend far beyond one bad ratings report. Because when you sit down to negotiate a media rights deal, and the network on the other side of the table has data showing that your viewership fluctuates dramatically based on whether one specific player is healthy and in the starting lineup, your leverage evaporates. You cannot promise consistent viewership. You cannot guarantee the audience numbers that justify the kind of deal that transforms this league financially. You are asking networks to pay premium prices for a product that is not reliably premium without that one player. This is not a sports conversation anymore at that point. It is a business crisis. And the decisions being made at the organizational level, the coaching philosophy being imposed, the post-game reactions that signal relief instead of concern when the franchise player sits out. Those decisions are not happening in a vacuum. They are happening inside a league that desperately needs to prove its financial viability to the next generation of media partners. The WNBA had something almost impossible to manufacture fall directly into its lap. A genuine phenomenon. A player who transcends the sport the way only a handful of athletes in any generation ever managed to do. Someone whose presence alone changes the conversation, elevates the platform, and brings in audiences that no marketing campaign could have reached. And portions of its own structure seem determined to minimize that rather than build around it. That is the real story here. Not just the post-game speech. Not just the injury list, not just the empty upper sections 5 minutes before tip-off. The real story is about what happens when an institution is offered something transformative and responds with ambivalence, with internal resistance, with a culture that seems more comfortable managing its star than celebrating her. The ratings will come back. The numbers will tell the story in the clearest possible language. And whatever those numbers say, the WNBA is going to have to reckon with what they mean, not just for one season, not just for one coaching staff, but for the long-term trajectory of a league standing at the most important crossroads in its history. The question is whether the right people are paying attention. If you made it this far, you clearly have thoughts on this one. Drop them in the comments below. Do you think Stephanie White can make this work with Caitlin Clark? Or is this situation already past the point of no return? Let me know where you stand. And if you want to see more breakdowns like this one, where we do not sugarcoat what is actually happening, make sure you are subscribed and have the notification bell turned on, because we have a lot more coming. See you in the next one.